Hey, everybody. It is a pleasure and a delight to be able to worship with my Sanctuary North family this morning. And I also want to add my own happy Mother's Day to all the mamas. I mean, as soon as we are done here, I'm going to be sending the text messages and making the phone calls to my mom and aunties and women who have been mother figures and friends who are mamas. So it's going to be a very busy Sunday. I am currently, giving you a little information about myself, I'm currently a sociology PhD student at Brown. I'm finishing up my third year of six. It may actually be 6.5 given what's going on in the world right now. Stalled some of my field work in India. Um, and so there is actually a concept of my work I want to tell you a little bit about. Uh, it's captivated me. I've interwoven it into my domestic research on race relations in churches and my international work on anti-sex trafficking networks. And this concept is called cultural narrative theory. So cultural narrative theory explains how people tell stories about themselves and how they live out variations on or sub-narratives on a master narrative. For example, the American dream is a master narrative, and the immigrant coming to America is like a sub-narrative under this master narrative. So all the stories that we tell about ourselves are couched in a master narrative. It's how we make sense of our world. There's this one scholar, Fulford, who wrote that a master narrative swallows us. It is a dwelling place that encompasses our ideas about the history of our culture, its possibilities, and our own identity. We are intended to define our lives within it. So the master narrative and the sub narratives based upon it, they may or may not actually be true, but we live in it and our lives are swallowed by it, so they feel very true to us. And when holes are poked in the narrative or the narrative fall apart, it can feel like our lives are very unstable, and that is currently what's going on for a lot of us right now. For everyone, there's narratives that we have created that help us feel in control of our lives that are completely crumbling. The narrative of like the hustling entrepreneur has come to like a screeching halt for some people. The high achievers, like, oh, there's some stressors that come with quarantine that is just like really squelching that narrative of who they are. However, narratives falling apart isn't necessarily a bad thing. Ooh, I popped out for a second. Hello, I'm back. So the as I said, the whole thing of master narratives coming to a screeching halt can really mess with people's lives. But falling apart is not necessarily a bad thing. So older brother in his early teen years, he had created a master narrative for himself that he was grown. So this narrative led him to believe that he could have a girlfriend before the 16-year-old marker that we have in our family of that's when you can date. So girl called one day uh, and my mom picked up the phone. My mom very politely let her know that is, right now, he can't come to the phone and he's actually not allowed to date. And this girl took my mother's very polite tone as a sign of weakness. And she responded, well, ain't he a grown? And my mother, Sheila Ann, does not play that. She said, no, he ain't a grown, and don't you call back, and hung up the phone. So that was my older brother's narrative falling apart that he's grown. It led to what I imagine was a very uncomfortable conversation with my parents later, and some keen embarrassment at school when it came to be known. But his narrative falling apart wasn't a bad thing. It allowed him to grasp hold of this master narrative, this true narrative, that he is not an independent grown man, he is Sheila Ann's teenage son. So in that moment, even though that narrative fell apart and it was not comfortable, there is the truth he was able to grab hold of. And that is what happens sometimes when our narratives fall apart. It offers us the opportunity to grab hold of the master narrative. It's the narrative not crafted by ourselves, but by our God. And that is part of what this new normal series is helping us do. And I want to contribute today by pointing us to a master narrative, this master narrative of us going from one degree of glory to the next, which we read about in 2 Corinthians 3:18. So providing some context for this verse, in this chapter, the writer Paul references something that happened after the Israelites made their exodus out of Egypt, went through the Red Sea, and came to Mount Sinai. There, Moses went up the mountain to talk to God and brought God's message back down the mountain. When Moses spent time in God's presence, like that, his face would literally shine afterward. There would be such a light coming from this man's face that the Israelites were terrified, and they were like, you got to put a veil over that. I mean, they literally lampshaded Moses. Like, that's a mess. Now, Paul writes that if that level of glory, lit up face that needs a lampshade level of glory, is attached to the old way of connecting with God through animal sacrifice and adhering to the law, that if that level of glory is attached to the old way, then what level of glory can we imagine is attached to the new way of connecting with God through the belief in Jesus, where the glory shining from the face doesn't need to be hidden? So reading in 2 Corinthians, starting in verse 16, when one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. So before we sit with the part of the passage that I want to highlight, the being transformed from one degree of glory to another, I want to briefly touch on what glory is. Now, this is something I've been trying to grasp the concept of glory intermittently for years. I mean, I get close to it and then it's like, oh, nope, I didn't get it. So for hundreds of years, believers have been trying to grasp it. And I'm about to give you just like a crumb's worth of centuries of musing. So in this passage, the word glory has two meanings. The first, glory, that is in the phrase, beholding the glory of the Lord, is referring to the majesty and perfect excellence of Christ. It encompasses his magnificence, his dignity, his grace, his supremacy. It's a beauty that is inherent to the Lord's holiness. It's like he's so grand and so perfect and so marvelous that light just radiates out of him. He is so grand and so perfect and so wonderful that when he entered like a cloud into the temple that Solomon built, the priests couldn't even continue doing their work of offering sacrifices. That is the glory of the Lord. The second meaning is applied to the glory in the phrase from one degree of glory to another. Here, glory is referring to the blessed condition and existence that followers of Jesus can look forward to. I really love the way that C.S. Lewis spoke about it in his message, The Weight of Glory. He said, "It is written that we shall stand before him, shall appear, shall be inspected. The promise of glory is the promise, almost incredible and only possible by the work of Christ, that some of us, that any of us who really chooses, shall actually survive that examination, shall find approval, shall please God, to be a real ingredient in the divine happiness, to be loved by God, not merely pitied." I love that. I love that so much. Glory for us is being able to bring God pleasure and delight, to be loved by God. That is a glorious condition to be in. So taking these two definitions of glory, let's look again at 2 Corinthians 3:18. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. This is telling us that as we behold the glory of the Lord, that beauty of his holiness, his excellence, his grace, his dignity, his magnificence, we are gradually transformed to look more like him, drawing his pleasure and approval. As some translations put it, we are going from glory to glory. So what does that mean for us in this moment? First, I want to point out that if we are going from glory to glory, if glory is our future, then where are we now? We are in glory at this moment. Followers of Jesus, stop and think of that. We are actually in glory right now, even if it doesn't feel like it. Like, I do not feel at this moment I am living in the fullness of glory and wonder and beauty and grand adventure with my God. At the moment, my existence, most of the time these days, is in 250 square feet. My studio apartment is tiny. It's even a struggle to decide like which place to even have as my like video call backdrop. Like I get a neutral thing if I sit on my bed, but then it's like wobbly, and I can like sit at my desk, but then you have like the view of my closet and my bathroom and my kitchen like all behind me. It's not good. So I tried something different today. This may be something new. I don't know. We'll see how it works out. So this does not exactly feel like living in glory. So very often, even in the most normal of circumstances, that's the case. It's our lives sometimes are not conducive to our recognizing the truth that we are in glory right now. Not only are we in glory now, and this is my second point, we are looking forward to the glory to come. This means not only looking forward to the ultimate glory, hearing, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." It also means looking forward to the results of the Holy Spirit transforming you day by day. In Philippians, Paul writes that he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. This is a continual work that God does. This is a gift of grace that draws us deeper into dependence and intimacy with God. This is a gift of grace that gives us freedom, since wherever the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. The transforming work that starts as soon as we start following Jesus continues on and on and on. Sometimes we don't even realize what's happening inside of us, but it is there waiting to be revealed in our day-to-day lives, waiting for us to have moments of recognition. Like, I didn't realize how much I had become like my mother after spending so much time with her. I spent a lot of time with her growing up, helping her around the house, tagging along with her whenever she went to work at church. And there's one stretch of time from middle school to high school when I'd come home after school. And I remember I'd sit with her and I'd catch the tail end of General Hospital, soap opera. And then we watch Oprah. And then I would take a nap beside her while the afternoon news came on. And it was especially during these times of watching Oprah together, we'd use the topic of the day as like a way to spark conversation during commercial breaks. There were some very deep conversations that happened during that time. But it wasn't until I left home for undergrad that I realized how much like my mother I had become as a result of spending so much time with her. Even now, sometimes I catch myself and I'm like, ooh, Sheila Ann, ooh, you are your mama's daughter, girl. So are you your father's child? No longer a slave, as we read in Romans 8, but rather a free child who can call him Abba, Daddy, Papa. Have you seen moments in your life when you can say, did I just sound like you? Ooh, like, it's the God in me, what? Hey, it's the God in, Mary, if anybody remembers. Yeah, okay. Just like spending time with my mama slowly but surely made me into a reflection of her. As we behold Christ, we are being transformed into a reflection of him. Just like our lampshaded Moses coming down the mountain after spending time with God reflected the glory of the Lord. And here I want to mark my third point, which is that although this transformation is a gift of grace, unearned and only possible through the work of the Holy Spirit, although it is a gift, the transformation requires our participation. It requires us to behold the Lord. Tim Keller wrote, "To behold the glory of Jesus means that we begin to find Christ beautiful for who he is in himself. It means a kind of prayer in which we are not simply coming to him to get his forgiveness, his help for our needs, his favor and blessing. Rather, the consideration of his character, words, and work on our behalf becomes inherently satisfying, enjoyable, comforting, and strengthening." He goes on, "If the beauty and glory of Christ do not capture our imaginations, dominating our waking thought and fill our hearts with longing and desire, then something else will. We will be continually ruminating on something or some things as our hope and joy. Whatever those things are, they will frame our souls and transform us into their likeness. If we don't behold the glory of God in the face of Christ, then something else will rule our lives. We will be slaves. Beholding implies a fascination with the subject one is beholding. It captures your eyes, it captures your imagination, it creeps into your waking and your sleeping. It stirs inside of you joy and hope and love. It fills your time. Beholding is like an active stillness. It is stillness because of the fact that it requires consistent, fixed attention. It is active because this attention requires thinking and watching and inspires a stirring in the spirit. It is active because it involves the letting go of other things than that which you are beholding. Moses beheld God on Mount Sinai for 40 days and nights, receiving the 10 commandments, and came down afterward with that shining face. It was 40 days and nights of fixed and fascinated attention. He didn't eat, he didn't drink. It was just God. And now I'm not telling you, not to, eat and drink for 40 days and 40 nights, but, although some form of fasting does indeed support a beholding attitude. What I'm saying is that the fascinations of this world fell away as Moses gazed upon the Lord, listened to his words, and watched his marvelous works. And sometimes I wonder, 40 days, there's what was written there is just, there's more that had to be said in those 40 days than just what was written in the Bible. I wonder what those conversations were like, but that's just a different. So anyway, beholding God means letting go of all other fascinations. We become so full with him that anything that is not him or does not reflect him loses its appeal. Our minds are renewed, they're rewired, leading to transformation as we read in Romans 12, so that we are no longer the same. Behold his glory, family. That is, behold his very character, his every word, and his good works. It is possible for us to behold the glory of the Lord in this way when we follow Jesus, who provides the new way to draw closer to God, to draw closer to God's glory. And I want to provide you with an example of the glory that you can behold this week before I end the message. But before I do that, there are a few pain points that emerge in the midst of beholding and transformation that I want to address. First, transformation is rarely ever smooth. It's rarely ever without some form of pain and can be very scary. I mean, the best metaphor I can think of is imagine you're a caterpillar. So you've been spending your days just chomping away at tasty green things and just living your life. Then you feel this compulsion to climb somewhere high and hang upside down. You don't know what's going on, but you got to form something called a chrysalis. And you're just like, this is new. It's a little scary, but I'm going to let this happen. Then the chrysalis forms, and then on the inside, you turn to mush. You become mush. That can't be a pleasant experience. Enzymes are eating away at every single cell. That has to be extremely painful. But in each cell is everything that you need to create the parts that make you a butterfly. Eventually, all those parts all come together and you emerge. You still can't quite fly though. You can't just flap away. You got to wait a minute. You got to dry yourself out. You got to get blood pumping into the wings, and then you can flap away. Again, this is not a pleasant experience. I can't imagine. I don't know if caterpillars really go through all these gyrations, but I would be messed up. It would be a lot. But that's what transformation is. It can be bewildering and painful and a bit much, but on the other side is new creation. Bit by bit, glory to glory, we become something new when we are transformed. So don't let that pain that comes with transformation scare you. Second, monotony can dampen our ability to perceive glory. As I said before, my days have shrunk to about 250 square feet now, and there's very little to ease the drone of days melting into each other. And I know for some of you, monotony is a part of your day-to-day right now as well. But practicing beholding his glory amid this monotony is like a chef practicing cracking eggs with one hand. Can you imagine how many eggs they had to go through and how boring that could be? How many eggs were messed up and their shell and the yolk of it, but eventually it becomes second nature. So that's what this is, beholding the glory in the middle of the monotony. It's like just practicing over and over again. So when you get into the middle of a busy kitchen, you can just do it real quick and keep going. So preparing for this message was an act of practicing beholding his glory. I was stuck. I felt led to touch on the pains that come with transformation, but I had a little talk with God. I took a late night walk, and I haven't done those in a while, but now it's like springtime and it's warmer, so I won't freeze at night. Um, so in this talk, I decided to let God know that talking about pain with transformation felt kind of heavy for like a Mother's Day message. And then I could feel him like kind of give me that side eye that he does. I was like, let me check myself. Right. So whatever you want to say, whatever you want me to say, it's the right time to say that thing. And I could feel him go like, mm-hmm. And then as I continued to walk and think about him and thinking about the pain and transformation, he reminded me of this one Ty Drabette song. I will go from strength to strength, from glory to glory, and I'll forever be chasing after you. Like, I love that song. And as soon as he reminded me of that song, I felt it's like when you've lost your breath and suddenly that first filling of the lungs comes and you feel such relief. I could feel that's what my spirit felt like. It felt like my spirit just expanded inside of my body. And I remembered, oh, yes, that's right. There's pain in the transformation, but what's the point? The point is you. The point is knowing you, chasing after you. It is you. I was so glad in the monotony to have that moment with him. In that moment, I remembered that I am in the glory. And my third point, the third pain in this particular season of our lives, transformation is accompanied by the pain of disrupted narratives. This makes the process difficult in a new way. However, although the stories we have created in order to define our lives are being shaken and removed, that which cannot be shaken is remaining. We have the opportunity in this moment to grasp more firmly to the master narrative that our God has written. The good news of Jesus' birth, death, resurrection, and the forgiveness of our sins, our good fortune of being pulled closer to God by following Jesus. This is glory, my family, rather than a glory that was so terrifying that Israel lampshaded the reflection of it on Moses' face after he came from Mount Sinai. Rather than that glory, the glory we are able to behold draws us close and lifts the spirit. If you need an example of some glory to behold this week, consider what is written in Hebrews chapter 12. Reading from verse 18, you have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm. Here the writer is referencing Mount Sinai. Continuing in verse 22, but you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. I get so excited every time I read this part of Hebrews. The writer paints a picture of a welcoming glory, a glory that does not drive us away in fear, but welcomes us close with love. This is the glory that God wraps around us. This is the glory that we live in even at this moment. Behold this glory, my family, our perfect God, who has a judge waiting to say, well done, my good and faithful servant, my child, with love and delight, our Jesus, who at this moment and every moment makes it possible for us to approach God as sons and daughters. Thousands of angels and all of our brothers and sisters in Christ gathered together for a huge party that we will one day take part in. So much joy and celebration, good food, good music, good fellowship, and a good God. So family, as we are about to take communion together, I want to encourage you, whether monotony or pain or both is part of your life right now, to behold the glory of the Lord. By it, you will be transformed, looking more and more like him.